I suggest that we start in by allowing Congressman Bernie Sanders to say a few words, and then what I'd like to do is open up the discussion so that if there are any questions relating to the contract or comments that we didn't get a chance to accommodate in the first session, we do that now. But we also don't limit ourselves to a totally reactive posture, and we allow ourselves to talk about other things that must be a part of the progressive agenda.
Thank you very much, and my congratulations to Reverend Jackson and the Rainbow Coalition for hosting this important event. I think the first thing that we have got to deal with is the despair and the despondency all over the progressive community, and that's not going to do us any good. So we have to get rid of the despair and, in fact, look at some of the positive aspects of what's been going on. And there is a positive aspect, and that is the agenda of the right wing is right there out on the table. All of America should, if we do our job well, know what they intend for the elderly, for the poor, for women, for the working people. And with that knowledge, we should be better able to educate and to organize and to go forward. For a start, it seems to me that the major struggle that we are having is trying to undo the perception of reality that Rush Limbaugh and Newt and the others have helped shape. Before I came here in my office, I was watching the television, and you'll all be happy to know that the economy is booming. Good news. Probably we can fold up our tents and go home because we don't have any problems. Number of new jobs that are being created is by the millions. Things are going great. That's what they told me on the television, and that's what I read in the newspapers in the state of Vermont. That's what they are telling us. All of us know that is obviously not the case. But one of the first problems that we have is fighting to get our point of view out on the media, in the newspapers, and all over this country. I think that one of the manifestations, one of the reasons for the Republican gains in the November 8th election is, in fact, people are angry. They really are. Do you know what they're angry about? They should be angry. They're angry that their standard of living is in decline. They're angry that they can't afford to send their kids to college. They're angry that they don't have any health care. They're angry that their jobs are going to China or to Mexico. They have a reason to be angry. Unfortunately, Newt and Rather and the other TV and radio people have forgotten to tell them what the cause of the problems are. Forgot to tell them that the 2% of the people who control the economy, they're doing very, very well. Forgot to tell them about the corporations that are making billions by throwing American workers out on the streets, going to Mexico and China. Forgot to tell them about the unfair tax system, which means that middle-class Americans are often paying a higher percentage of their incomes in taxes than are the rich. Forgot to tell them about the growing gap between the rich and the poor. So people are angry. And if they're angry, they are allowed to vent their anger. How are they allowed to vent their anger? Against immigrants, against welfare recipients, against people of color, against the gay community. We're allowed to do that. Unfortunately, we are not allowed to stand up to the people who have the wealth and who have the power. So our job is to understand the legitimate anger of people and to try to funnel that anger against the people who are really causing the problems and impoverishing tens of millions of Americans. Very briefly, let me tell you what some of us in Congress are trying to do. Number one, the Progressive Caucus, point by point, will not only be responding to the contract with America, but we will be posing progressive alternatives. Number one, among other things, we're going to be fighting to raise the minimum wage. People can't live on $4.25 an hour. We need a minimum wage of at least $5.50 an hour. Now, there's some good news. There was a piece in the Washington Post the other day which suggested that President Clinton, in fact, may be next week announcing his intention to move forward with a $5.25 minimum wage. And I think we've got to tell the president that we demand that the minimum wage go up and that he come forward and do that. Number two, despite all the good talk about the fine jobs in America, what all of us know is that both our physical and human infrastructure is collapsing. to talk about America doing well when in this city of Washington, D.C., in the time when everybody is saying education is so important, they're talking about closing down libraries. In my own state of Vermont, they're laying off workers because of Amtrak cutbacks. We should be expanding rail service, expanding mass transportation, rebuilding our infrastructure, both physical and human. So the Progressive Caucus will be introducing a major jobs bill, $60 billion a year, put 1 million people to work at good wages, rebuilding our communities. And a third issue that we are concerned about is that we understand that one of the reasons that the standard of living of average Americans is in decline, and one of the reasons that major corporations have been able to throw millions of American workers out on the street as they go to China, and I always get a kick out about that. Remember when we were younger, China was a terrible authoritarian communist country, and we had to spend billions of dollars protecting us from the Yellow Menace. You remember all that? Yes. Guess what? Last I heard, China is still an authoritarian communist country. But, on the other hand, we now know that it's a wonderful place to invest because you can get workers there for 20 cents an hour. They can't form unions. They can't elect their own officials. So it's a good country now to invest in. But what we believe is that one of the reasons that working people have not had the power is the obvious decline in trade union membership. So one of the other pieces of legislation that we will be pushing very hard is a radical change in labor law and the need to make it much, much easier for workers to be able to form unions, to negotiate decent contracts, and to have more political power. So those are some of the issues that we will be working on. Thank you.